Rosa. The title of her project is The Model Holistic, the application of the adaptive cycle to Rust Belt cities.
Cities are much like ecosystems, going through 4 phases: exploitation, conservation, release, and reorganization. Together, these are known as the adaptive cycle, an ecological resilience model developed by 2 ecologists, C.S. Hollig and C.J. Walters. This cycle describes the socio-ecological and self-organizational patterns of complex systems over an extended period of time. A system begins in the exploitation phase, where resources and capital nutrients grow steadily over time. As competition increases, the system enters the conservation phase, where resources are protected. As resources become limited, the system becomes very vulnerable, leading to an eventual release of resources. Finally, as the system matures, it enters reorganization, where resources are recombined and growth resumes in new innovative patterns. The 4 phases of exploitation, conservation, release, and reorganization are very important forces not only in ecosystems, but also in terms of urban growth. Through my own personal account, I began to examine these phases in an urban context. In the year 1961, my mother and our family took a risk and immigrated from Poland to a small city in upstate New York called Utica to embark on a journey toward a better life. As you can imagine, it was very difficult coming to a new country, not knowing English, and having to adjust to the American dream after living in a one-room home with dirt floors. However, it was the rich culture and community of Utica that made my family feel like they had a piece of home again. Utica today is sadly not the glorified city my mom remembers, and so I began to question, how did Rust Belt cities like Utica go from being a part of the industrial heartland of North America to now being viewed as the ultimate decay of the American industrial system? This thesis seeks to prove the adaptive cycle to be a holistic model for Rust Belt cities to establish architectural and urban strategies that increase city resiliency. More specifically, my area of focus for this thesis will apply the adaptive cycle to the Bag Square neighborhood of Utica. By analyzing Bag Square through the adaptive cycle, we can determine what entities have pushed or deterred the neighborhood along the cycle, and what design interventions are necessary to increase city resiliency. The reorganization of Bag Square will act as a gateway between major revitalization efforts in downtown Utica, greatly changing the overall identity and connectivity of the urban fabric. The adaptive cycle is a new organizational method and can be a model holistic, which visualizes Utica as a 21st century Rust Belt city that is diverse, decentralized, innovative, and inclusive.
This primary focus is a new type of adaptable construction.
When I was 4, I remember watching my dad draw on a large tilted white table that my city cup always seemed to slide off of. And when I was 5, I remember moving into our new home, where I had picked the shade of pink that my room would be for the next 10 years. My dad used his knowledge of building technology, his desire to have a home that was large enough to house 4 wily kids, and his overall handling manliness that came from growing up on a farm to build him and my mom's dream home. I have never known a life where these simple pleasures of the built environment were not accessible to me. If I needed something, and I could truly need anything, my cowboy of a father knew how to build it. Through conversation with a friend who owns a small orphan home in Uganda, I realized that not everybody has access to these same simple luxuries. I began to study how the built environment is developed in countries that don't have access to government housing or welfare or architectural education as I do. What shapes their built environment? Current construction devices, cultural context, programmatic needs, or maybe it's just their accessibility to construction materials. This thesis proposes a new construction type that looks beyond the physical need of a community to train and equip unskilled laborers to continue expanding their own built environment. This method will look at the manipulation of indigenous materials, climate, and passive systems to design a project that's both respectful to the surrounding community and innovative in its final design. I will look at the needs of a small Ugandan community outside the city limits of the country's capital of Kampala. Due to political climate of the nation, many people travel inward to denser areas seeking employment, leaving children in the care of others or often alone. So the testing ground of this method will be a primary school and housing quarters for children who have been orphaned in the area and surrounding communities. Applying this method to two separate programmatic typologies will, yes, test the feasibility of the construct, but it'll also allow it to morph to the needs of other program types. My family had the knowledge to design within the needs of our particular environment, and although the method may look different in contrasting climates, the primary focus remains the same. And that is to shift our focus away from just providing a monetary solution and instead redirect our attention into providing a structural system that teaches as it is being built. Yes, leaving behind a completed structure, but more importantly, the tools needed to continue expanding their own built environment.